Hello, my name is Rachel Beasley, and I'm the concertmaster and co-artistic director of the Australian Romantic and Classical Orchestra. I'd like to welcome you all here to our final Voyage of Musical Discovery for 2019. And tonight we're going to be exploring dynamics and expressive techniques in the music of Brahms and contemporary music by Icelandic and Australian composers. The first half of the program will be performed using specialised Romantic period instruments of the Australian Romantic and Classical Orchestra with guest international director and violinist Jakob Lehmann. Following this, the Acapella Ensemble, The Idea of North, under the musical direction of Naomi Crellin, will explore contemporary works for voices. The Brahms Serenade No. 1 in D major blurs the line between chamber and symphonic music of the Romantic era. Now almost universally known in its full orchestral guise, it started life as a chamber work. And the reconstructed Nonet version for flute, 2 clarinets, bassoon, horn, and single strings will be presented in the program this evening. So please welcome to the stage Jakob Lehmann and the Australian Romantic and Classical Orchestra to perform the first movement, Allegro Molto, from Serenade No. 1 by Johannes Brahms. large chamber music instrumentations, like the one we've just heard, as well as chamber arrangements of symphonic, solo and vocal repertoire, were actually very common in the 19th century and were the main way that music was distributed and experienced in the salons and homes of musicians and music patrons. Remember, this was way before streaming. This more intimate instrumentation allowed the composers to create very different and more personal dynamics and expressive techniques from the fully orchestrated versions. And this is something to consider as a composer and arranger yourself. The Brahms Serenades are purely instrumental, and in classical forms we hear the sonata form, later in the piece the rondo form and a minuet and trio form. The Serenades are composed in several short movements, in this case 6 movements, and are constructed concisely upon thematic material and its development. This opening movement has many examples of dynamics and other expressive techniques that emphasize and enhance the melodic and rhythmic contours of the music, while the use of numerous Italian musical terms, such as dolce, espressivo, piano dolce, espressivo e dolce, I think it starts to sound like a coffee order, actually. Crescendo, poco a poco. Offer some suggestions to where the performers are invited to give greater expression to a specific phrase or theme. Let's first listen to the opening dynamic landscape as Brahms builds up layers from the drone, played by the viola and cello, establishing the setting for the others to join. First, the horn plays the folk tune softly, as if in the distance. Then the clarinet picks up the tune, and the horn joins in with the drone. Listen to how Brahms creates this atmosphere. We've now established the summary and rustic key of D major, although still quietly. Brahms was very inspired by Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony, which we performed for you here with Richard Gill in one of last year's Voyages. Brahms also composed this particular movement as a homage to his favourite work by his favourite composer, a work which we just performed with our young Mannheim symphonists in the winter school, Haydn's final London Symphony. This movement conjures a similar feeling or image of the natural landscape. At this point, Brahms carefully adds the marking crescendo poco a poco, as well as adding more instruments to strengthen the harmony. Brahms builds this tension by changing the timbre and the register of the music with the added instrumentation, as well as reinforcing this with a gradual crescendo. So now, let's hear how that same folk tune from the beginning, played by the horn, sounds when it is played tutti, or all together, in a fortissimo, a little later in the piece. So how many of you listen to music through earphones these days? Well, the sound that's coming through those earphones has been compressed and probably the volume turned right up. Unfortunately, it means that there's very little difference within the dynamic range that you're used to hearing. So your delicate hearing is also potentially being damaged, while your ability to listen attentively is certainly reduced. So now, by recognising that, and to recognising that we're listening to live music being performed in a concert hall, at a distance from your ears, let's play the whole sequence again from the beginning. And this time, close your eyes. Place yourself in the countryside. Listen attentively as the musician's sound in the distance appears to come closer and closer. In observing how dynamics and expressive techniques are performed, the prominent German cellist, Hugo Becker, from the 19th century, who was a friend of Brahms, noted, "Already in everyday speech, the attentive observer will hear that no one actually speaks at all times with a completely neutral tone colour and dynamic. Fluctuations of pitch and volume occur, even in the most ordinary speech. How much more when the person wants to persuade and to convince and to advocate for himself, when he commands or objects in a word, when he speaks in an effect. The differences in musical expression consist not only of coarse-grained dynamics and of the tempo, but also mostly paired with a shading of accents, of the shifting of rhythmical elements within the rhythmical unity, through which gathering and loosening ebb and flow, tension and release develop. Rhythmic freedom and nuance is another expressive technique, which is very typical in Romantic music, and has been well documented by my learned colleague in the Ironwood Chamber Ensemble and Professor and Associate Dean of Research at the Sydney Conservatorium of Music, Neil Perez da Costa, who is particularly passionate about the study and application of historical performance practices in the music of Brahms. And together with Emeritus Professor at the University of Leeds, Clive Brown, has challenged musicians to rethink what the actual notation means, what is perhaps missing, and what expression is musically and stylistically appropriate to this period. So by researching well-known performers of this period, such as the British pianist Fanny Davies, who was performing at the end of the 19th century and was admired for her interpretations of Brahms's music, some clues can be found. For instance, she writes that the signs, which we refer to as hairpins, yes, that were used by Brahms and often occurred when he wished to express great sincerity and warmth, applied not only to tone, but to rhythm also. He would linger not on one note alone, but on a whole idea, as if unable to tear himself away from its beauty. He would prefer to lengthen a bar or a phrase rather than spoil it by making up the time into a metronomic bar. So let's get back to those espressivo coffee orders. Notice what happens when these markings are added to the score, where the composer is encouraging the use of expressive techniques individual to each instrument. In string playing, for example, this includes the frequent use of Portamento. These techniques were particularly present during the Romantic era, as is evident in early recordings of the famous violinist Joseph Joachim, who was a good mate of Brahms and who conducted his Serenade in 1859. Let's hear the contrasting second subject, which is much more lyrical and legato than that folky opening tune in the first subject. It is introduced by the violin and bassoon. Let's listen to this theme now, without an ounce of expression. So how does the composer influence the performer with the dynamics and expressive musical terms and symbols which are added to the score? Can you please play it again for us with your molto espressivo version, following all of Brahms's indications? Let's hear how Brahms accompanies this theme with the horn and clarinets filling out the harmony, while the rhythm section is provided by the rest of the strings, playing piano. Could you please play that section without the solo lines? We can take in the whole passage and notice how your ear is clearly drawn toward the melody, especially with the artistic and rhythmic freedom implied by these espressivo markings. So dynamics refer to the loudness of different notes and phrases in a passage of music. Score notations indicate extremes from very soft and delicate to very loud and strong. However, these cannot be measured in absolute levels. Dynamics are relative to one another and also depend on the type of instrument or voice, the number of players, the style of the music, and the performance situation. Compositional as well as interpretational changes in timbre, articulation, tempo, instrument-specific effects, along with dynamics, are collectively referred to as expressive techniques. These are the tools for bringing a composition to life and can contribute to establishing and altering its mood and character. But composing on a computer nowadays can often lead to a cut and paste technique. The danger being that scores can become so full with little room for wind players to breathe and with little contrast in the textures. Therefore, it is always good to consider that you don't need to fill in the whole score with all the instruments available to you all the time. You may have noticed Brahms' fabulous use of silences or general pauses towards the end of the first movement. This cut and paste technique was obviously not an issue for Brahms, although he did revise the format of this work many times. He originally conceived it as a four-movement work for Nonet. Later he added two scherzi and trio movements when the piece was reorchestrated. Let's listen now to the first of these and to which compositional techniques Brahms used to achieve a shadowy and dark sound world in the opening. So which compositional techniques were evident? The key? What key were we in? Minor? I hear minor, so that already gives a colour to the tonality. The texture? Was everyone playing? No, so it was quite thin. And which of the instruments were playing? Which are the colours that you're provided with? And that influences the dynamic level. The choice? Who was playing? Bassoon? And strings, yes. Now, the register. I always find that a curious thing. Register can affect dynamics. So everything was set very low in each instrument. And the articulation? How was the articulation? Nice and smooth, wasn't it? And let's have a little listen and think what did Brahms write? Because he's given an indication to the score as well. Sempre piano e dolce. So sweet and soft. And the tempo marking, lively, but not too much. So by contrast, let's listen to the heartwarming and rustic opening of the trio. So I'd like you to listen to the same key criteria and see what is different. Okay, so what key has he modulated to? The major. So we're in B flat major now. So, and all the instruments are involved, horn, bassoon, strings, plus the flute and the clarinet. So that creates that different dynamic texture. The register, we go right up high in the violin, and that strong rhythmic pulse as well, that really adds to that. So that's on top of the fact that Brahms has then written a dynamic marking in. So it's a good thing to consider at what point do you need to add it in, because it's already been implied by the register and the instruments. But he asks the performers again, a poco forte, so a little loud. And again, the tempo marking, a little more motion, poco più molto. So it's always good to notice where these key criteria are when we're listening to the music and thinking of composing those works ourselves. So when the ensemble finishes performing the Scherzo Trio in full, we will reset the stage and continue with more musical discoveries with the idea of North. this Voyage of Musical Discovery, we've given you a glimpse into the dynamic expressive techniques from Brahms' circle and the music from the Romantic period. As we look at and listen to the historical environment in which this music was composed, the historical instruments, and the compositional techniques of the time, we can gain a better understanding of where our music comes from today. And I'd like to welcome Nicole to the stage. Big timing. Yes. We thought it would be lovely during the reset to talk about the rehearsal process and what happens, what do we discover while we're rehearsing?
Well, particularly for this program, it was really interesting to spend a lot of time experimenting with actually all the things you were mentioning while we were on stage, Rachel, about the meaning particularly of the hairpins which Brahms uses. And there has been so much research in recent years as to what these markings meant in Brahms' time, very different to how we interpret them today. So we spent a lot of time in the last rehearsals experimenting really with different ways that we could interpret this crescendo diminuendo sign. So sometimes we take time, sometimes we just linger on the top note, sometimes we sped up towards the top note and slowed down on the way down again, down the written diminuendo, but it certainly doesn't mean get louder and then get softer. If you do that, it feels like a very dry interpretation, and it gives us so much more freedom, and every time you come across one, you can actually do it differently. So yeah, it's been really great journey to experiment with all of those markings.
And does that change when you're performing? I mean, we're performing a national tour at the moment, so this is part of several concerts. Do you come up with an interpretation and keep with that for every performance?
No.
So what do you do?
Well, because we spent so much time experimenting, we actually have lots of options, and we know that lots of them work. So actually what we do in performance now that we've rehearsed it well, is we just take the lead as we're playing. So we listen very carefully to each other, especially as soon as you add an element of rhythmic freedom to a performance, which we know was what they did in the 19th century. We know they didn't use the metronome, they didn't stay in time. There was a lot of freedom in rhythm, and it's quite a difficult technique to learn these days. We've been taught stay in time, and to move away from that and not just sound out of time. That's a difficult step. So it's about creating freedom, giving to each other, taking from each other, and we do that differently every time we play it now. So we're just listening, and it's like a living beast really now. We just we let the music take us. So.
And I notice very much when somebody has a solo line, that's a very interesting moment with dynamics. Does Brahms indicate when you've got a solo part that you're meant to play it louder than everybody else? Or is that just because we're listening to each other and we change the dynamic level in the hall?
No, he doesn't always mark it. No, sometimes not. We have a lot of markings like poco forte or più forte, so a little bit loud or more loud. Well, more loud than what? Than what we just had. And so so sometimes you have più forte, a little bit loud, and then when you look at, as a musician, you look at the F and you think, oh, loud, okay, play loud. But actually, if we look more carefully, we're in a piano section, so più loud just means a little bit louder than what you just did. So it's different, and you have to be very aware of who has the melodic line. And very interestingly, in this Nonet version of this serenade, we really had to look very carefully at that, because it's very intimate, and each melody line moves from one instrument to another very quickly. So it was a fantastic process to learn. Actually, the stage is ready.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Look
That
at that.
went very quickly.
It's a bit like being a detective, isn't it? When you're using these signs along the way and using them to research what is possible in the performance of the work. Well, I'm very pleased to introduce you to our special guests, the Acapella vocal ensemble, The Idea of North. Yes. Welcome. They will perform and present a number of works, an Icelandic hymn, which I don't dare to pronounce, I'll leave that to you, which translates roughly as Hear, Heavenly Creator, Growing Pains, composed by Nick Begbie, and arranged by Naomi Crellin, F Sharp by Tim Minchin, and Flame Trees composed by Walker Prestwich and arranged by Naomi Crellin. And they will explore dynamics and expressive techniques in this music. So thank you very much. Enjoy.
Thank you very much, everyone. So as mentioned, that is an Icelandic hymn. The text for that was written in the 13th century. Does anyone here speak Icelandic at all? No?
Really?
Oh, you do? Well, that's a shame because our pronunciation, I've heard, is spot on, so you'll have to take our word for it. So what we'd like to talk about with that one, as you can tell now that I'm talking into a microphone, depending on what space we are in, we have a number of songs that we sing that suit a kind of larger acoustic sound. And that one obviously is a good one to display that. Most of the singing that we do is amplified on individual microphones, just like this, but it creates a different kind of feel and emotion when we're singing off of mic for the audience. Well, that's our aim anyway. So what we'd like to do today is to demonstrate the difference for you to see, because obviously in the 13th century they didn't have microphones, particularly cordless ones, or sound systems, etc. So we'll give you an idea of what the difference is between the amplified and the non-amplified sound and what emotions they convey. Okay. So we're going to sing part of the song on mic, and then we'll sing some off mic to give you a bit of a feel for it.
Heyr Himna Smiður, hver skal þig bíður, komi mjúk til mín, miskunnin þín. Því heit ég á þig, þú hefur skapað mig. Ég þrællinn þinn, þú ert bragdinn minn.
So as you can see, it's quite a stark contrast, particularly being the bass singer in the group. Bass frequencies they travel omnidirectionally, is that right? And whereas higher frequencies tend to cut through the air a little easier, and so you probably notice that the bass sound was a lot easier to hear, perhaps.
You're like God, aren't you? Omnipresent.
Anyone seen The Lion King? I won't do it. Look harder. Anyway. Simba, I'm very disappointed in you. Anyway. So as you can hear, for me, I love it when I get the microphone in my hand, because you guys can hear what I can do down there. But obviously, so for me, what I will do is I'll actually try to project, and I'll actually use what we call a little bit more twang in the lower register for a song like that if I'm not on microphone. So, and when we do sing it on microphone, I'll finesse it a little bit more and make it a little warmer and a little softer.
Microphones also enable us to be much more subtle with our dynamics. When we're in a room this big and we're singing softly, our soft has to be about mezzo piano for you to actually hear us. But with these, we can do pianissimo, and the effect of a loud, amplified, soft sound is very, very different to the acoustic soft as well.
Okay. So now that we are on microphone, which is our default kind of position, sonically speaking, I'm going to hand it over to Nick Begbie, and we're going to perform his part of his song. I'll hand it over to Nick to introduce it.
Before I introduce the song, I'm going to introduce us. Is there anyone in the room who's never seen The Idea of North perform live before? Let me rephrase.
Yes.
Is there anyone in the room who has seen The Idea of... Oh, okay. Wow. And actually, is there anyone in the room who, before they heard about this concert, had never even heard of The Idea of North? Be honest, we've got thick skin. Okay, yep, we are Australia's least known famous people. Please put your hands together for our soprano, Emma Rule. Singing bass and Mufasa is Luke Thompson. Our alto and chief arranger and musical director is Naomi Crellin. My name is Nick Begbie and I sing tenor. And thank you. So we'd like to demonstrate a little bit of part of what's very important about being a singer, and that is characterization. So this next song is written by me about something that my 5-year-old said when he was having trouble going to sleep. He was very upset, he was crying. We went in and said, "What's the matter?" And he said, "You know, my leg hurts," through sobs of tears. "My leg hurts." And, you know, being all-knowing parents, we just defaulted to the easiest explanation and said, "It's okay, it's just growing pains." And he started crying even more. He became so distraught and upset, and we tried to get out of him. We asked him what was wrong, why he was so upset, and he said, "It's just that it only hurts in one leg. I don't want to lean." So word of warning to all your parents using that particular diagnosis. Anyway, obviously, because this song is from the perspective of a 5-year-old, sometimes as a singer you need to act the part of the protagonist or the storyteller. Sometimes you don't. You might be singing a song about a terrible breakup you've just had, and you may have just had one, so you don't have to do a lot of acting. In this case, the song's sung by a 5-year-old, so I don't have to do a lot of acting. But what we're going to do is we're going to sing the first little bit, and I'm going to sing it without any characterization or expression in that particular way, and then we'll do it again, and I'll try to add a little bit of my 5-year-old into it. Yes, Mum? When I go to bed, I fall straight asleep. My doona is warm, although it's plain. But there are times when I have to count sheep. I see them jumping round my brain. And sometimes at night, my leg gets so sore. Feels like there's something wrong, but my mummy says it'll be alright, that it won't last too long. So there are several things to think about when you're characterizing the storyteller. One of those is facial expression, because that sort of expression is really important when you're telling a story, because essentially our eyes, which are one of the most expressive parts of our faces, our eyes themselves don't move very much. They can't actually do much unless you want to squint them or open them too wide, and both of those things kind of make you look creepy. So what we need to do to get non-creepy expression is actually utilise all the muscles around your eyes. So typically your cheek bones, your cheek muscles, like this, your eyebrows. Your eyebrows are really great. So if you are ever singing in a choir and your conductor says, "Look alive," or "Look like you're enjoying something," all you've got to do is actually just raise your eyebrows a bit. And you will not be picked on by your choir director anymore. All you got to do is that. Because neutral eyebrow face makes you look bored. All right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is that to sound younger when you're singing, if you raise your larynx, so if you all put your fingers here and feel your larynx, and then start talking like a little kid like this, you might feel your larynx go up. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's right, makes you sound younger. So that's something I'll try to do. That was fantastic. That's something I'll try to do. And the other thing Luke's already spoken about, and that is to add in some more twang into your voice, because twang is something that little kids are incredibly good at. It's a survival technique. You speak with a lot of twang, your parents can hear where you are.
What's twang, Nick?
I'll show you what twang is, and I'm going to get you all to repeat after me. Mom! Okay, no, hang on. You can be far, far more annoying than that. Let's go. Yep.
That actually hurt us. Well done.
You're really good at that. Okay. Now this is Growing Pains, and I'm going to see if I can think about injecting all of those expressive techniques into this rendition.
1, 2,
When I go to bed, I fall straight asleep. My doona is warm, although it's plain. But there are times when I have to count sheep. I see them jumping round my brain, and sometimes at night my leg gets so sore. It feels like there's something wrong, but my mummy says it'll be alright, that it won't last too long. It's just growing pains, not anything more. It's just growing pains, I've had them before. It's just growing pains, just a little bit sore. And when I've grown up, I'll still be me, only more. It's my little kid body growing up when I dream. I'm stretching out so tall. But when it hurts a lot, Dad gets really proud and measures me on the wall.
He measures me,
but I worry still about when I get old. What's it all gonna mean? But only hurts one leg, so if just one leg grows, oh, I don't wanna lean. It's just growing pains, not anything more. It's just growing pains, I've had them before. It's just growing pains, just a little bit sore. And when I've grown up, I'll still be me, only me. Oh, my mom and dad tell me sometimes they had them too, and they were still little pups. But now they just grown about everything else. Maybe that's why they're called grown-ups. I have to admit, although sometimes it aches, I know it won't drive me insane. But knowing my little bro, I reckon he just might, 'cause he's a real life growing pain. Not anything more, it's just growing pains. You've had it before, I promise just growing you'll never leave. And I know that in time you'll understand what I mean. It's just growing pains, there's not anything. And when I grow up, when will I grow up? Oh, it's just growing pains, just a little bit sore. And when I am big, yeah, no longer a kid, oh, I'll still be me. I'll be only grown up.
Did you eyebrows. They make a big difference. Nick has particularly flexible eyebrows, though. He can do some really independent things with his eyebrows. He actually has to, we have to get him to put a lid on it because we've had complaints. We're going to sing you a song by Tim Minchin now. If you don't know Tim, he's the guy who wrote the music for Matilda. He's also the guy who wrote a whole lot of other songs, and some of them we can sing to school children and some of them we can't. This is one that we can. Nick is using a pitch pipe, which is how we get our notes. We're acapella, so we don't have any instruments to guide us, and sometimes that is a great thing, and sometimes that is an awkward thing, like when you can't get the right note. That's not the right note. No, it's not in F sharp. It's in F. No, it's in F. I know it's called F sharp, but the song's in F. You just had the lead in the last song.
So I'm fatigued, I should get to choose.
Well, that's higher.
No, but it's more comfortable.
Well, it's 3 against 1, so. Could you sing Nick his note, please? F, everybody F. Thank you. Okay. We sing at the beginning, so we're going to start in F.
So I've been having a little problem recently that is quite disturbing musicalically, involving a semitonal discrepancy both vocally and collegialically. You see, vocalists of different varieties prefer phonating in particular keys, and some singers tend to treat preferentially those notes they tackle most proficiently. Now you don't have to be a member of Mensa to understand the depths of my dilemma. These two factions that you see favour two different keys, thus the rift betwixt the others and my tenor. Now I like nothing more than hearing vocal groups in F. It warms the very cockles of my heart. The trouble is that F can leave me vocally bereft. You see, they like singing in F major, but I like singing in F sharp. F sharp. F sharp. I refuse to fall victim to their charms. I don't see why my larynx should give in to their demands. I'll not be forced to compromise my art, so they'll just keep singing in F major, but I'll keep singing in F sharp. F sharp. F sharp. F sharp. They'll keep singing in F major, so I'll keep singing in F sharp.
Does that song sound as hard as it feels? How many people are singers here in the room? How many singers do we have in the house? So you will know. We have excited singers in the house. You will all know how difficult it is to sing in a different key from the person next to you, unless you're a tenor. They just don't seem to have a problem doing that. So what we want to demonstrate in this song is the use of tension as an expressive tool, because tension in music is very, very important, otherwise it sounds like muzak. That's basically the main difference between music and muzak. Muzak is all resolution, it's all unoffensive and safe and boring. And the tension and resolution balance is what determines how the audience feels. So as an arranger, I find it very important to get that tension resolution balance correct. Tim Minchin really pushes it. Really pushes it in this song, but it's to comedic effect. How many people felt intensely uncomfortable when Nick was singing the F sharp against our F major and D minor chords? Good, you're meant to. How many people thought it was just awesome and they would like us to just keep doing that forever and ever? Okay, so there's a classical composer called Schoenberg who I would recommend to anyone in the house who's really into that level of tension and resolution, because there's not much resolution at all. So it's also a matter of personal taste and it's a stylized thing. But it's really important when you are singing a tension to maintain the tension and to actually lean into it and enjoy it. Because if you don't lean into it and enjoy it, it immediately sounds like a mistake. So we're going to experiment with this in the house. We're going to get you to sing a D minor chord. So how many people would like to be the D of the D minor? Who are like the rocks of the ensemble? Great. Who would like to be the third? You're very important because you make it minor. And how many would you like to be the fifth because you kind of don't matter? Great. Okay. So can we have our Ds, please? Just go ah. Beautiful. Can we have our Fs? And can we have our As? Keep sustaining it. Keep sustaining it. And we're going to sing an F sharp against that. Go. Very good. How many people were on the F? And how many people think they might have just kind of slid up to meet us on the F sharp? Because it's very magnetic, the F sharp, yes. That's a very important thing to do in acapella, is to hold your notes against other people. Now we're going to get you to sing the F sharp while we sing the D minor chord. Luke, could you give us a bottom D, please? Can you be the minor? And now can you guys sing an F sharp with Nick? I can't handle it! Okay, that's as much as we can possibly cope with. So who felt more confident doing that F sharp that time than they did doing the D minor chord before? Telling it like it is. The major third has a power that the minor third doesn't. The major third has a strength to it and a brightness to it that can override the minor third. And so when we were practicing, this is one of the hardest songs in our repertoire, because to hold that semitone and not kind of merge into the same place is very, very important, because if we merge in the same place, the entire point of the song is gone. So when you yourselves are playing your own music and arranging and writing your own music, think about the points in the piece that create tension and how that might make the audience feel, because that's a way of expressing a feeling without actually having to write a lyric or write a chord progression. It could just be that one chord or that one note that carries that power. We're going to move on now to our final song.
Thank you, Naomi. So the last thing we're going to talk to you about tonight is the expressive technique of Robato. And Robato is that glorious push-pull of tempo that you can do if you have the melody. Sometimes the whole ensemble does it, or sometimes, particularly in jazz, you'll have the soloist out the front and they will be playing around with the tempo within their own melody, and yet the ensemble is keeping the steady beat. Nick was talking before about characterization, and a big part of what we do, particularly as singers, is we consider ourselves singers and musicians, of course, but also actors, and it's so important to what we do and how we communicate to our audience. And so we use rubato in this way to express the lyric more directly, and so we can sort of add nuances to what we're trying to express to our audience. And we're going to demonstrate that for you now with Flame Trees. Has anyone heard of the band Cold Chisel? So this is a Cold Chisel song. This, sorry to disappoint, sounds nothing like the original because Naomi had her way with it. She's turned it upside down, mashed it around and spat it out in a completely different way, which is what she likes to do with a lot of her arrangements. And so the start of this piece, normally we do it in a very rubato way, but to start with we're going to sing it for you pretty similar to the original with a very strict at tempo, and we won't be playing around with the tempo to begin with.
Kids are driving Saturday afternoon, just pass me by. I'm just savoring familiar sights, We share some history, this town and I can't stop that long forgotten feeling of her. Time to book a room and stay tonight.
Okay, so that was at tempo. Now we're going to do it the way we normally perform it, which I lead the group because I have the solo in this piece, and they have to follow my rubato. So we're going to do that as a group now.
When Emma first joined the Idea of North, we had already been singing this with our previous soprano, and so Emma found it a challenge to get us to change our rubato to fit hers because we were used to somebody else's rubato. So this is the culmination of a lot of practice in following Emma.
Kids out driving Saturday afternoon, just pass me by. I'm just savoring familiar sights, We share some history. This town and I can't stop that long forgotten feeling of her. Time to book a room and stay.
So that's the other version. Thank you. So what we're going to do now, just to see if they're really following me, this time I'm going to sing it still with rubato, but not in the usual phrasing that we sing together, we perform together so much that even though it still has that little bit of push-pull, it's not as much. It's not as spontaneous every time. So this time I'm going to test them and see if Nick's really paying attention.
All I know is I'll be singing this in F sharp.
Kids out driving Saturday afternoon, just pass me by. I'm just savoring familiar sights, We share some history. This town and I can't stop that long forgotten feeling of her.
as you can hear, the first version was pretty devoid of dynamics, because when you're in a steady tempo, it can be hard to remember to vary what you're doing. The second one had a lot of dynamic contrast and it matched the lyric. The third one had a lot of dynamic contrast and it absolutely did not match the lyric. But it's a really, really good exercise to make sure that you are all locked in, because we kind of have to employ ESP to be able to do what we do like this. Or at least the rest of us have to conform to one person's idea of what's right. And that's usually the soprano or the tenor. So you've just seen both of those examples. So now that you've heard all of those different semi-versions, I think, do we have time to do the whole piece? We do, we've got time. This might be the first Arco concert that's run under time unless we keep singing. So let's keep singing. And I think after you've just heard that interrupted version, it would probably be good to hear the whole thing. Enjoy Flame Trees.
Kids out driving Saturday afternoon, just pass me by. I'm just savoring familiar sights, We shared some history. This town and I can't stop that long forgotten feeling of her. Time to book a room and stay tonight.
Memory to make me cry.
Thank you. Thank you so much to the Idea of North. Thank you very much. So in conclusion, the questions we hope to have raised with you with this voyage of musical discovery are, what are the expressive boundaries between the composer and performer, and how far do you go with the instructions on the page as a composer in relation to your wishes for the performance of the music when it comes to dynamics and expressive techniques? When composing for our contemporaries today, we perhaps don't need to be explicit in communicating the performance techniques of our time or genre, which was of course the case throughout time. But when your works are performed by musicians who are not of your circle or your time, how will they be aware of these same expressive techniques that we take for granted now? So I'd like to share my thanks to Jakob, Lehmann and the Australian Romantic and Classical Orchestra colleagues, and to Emma, Naomi, Luke and Nick from the Idea of North. So, thank you. It's been such a fascinating insight into the music, and seeing those parallels that run through the music from the classical and romantic all the way through to the contemporary and jazz, and to be aware of all of these expressive techniques in the music of Brahms, the music of Icelandic and Australian composers. On behalf of my co-artistic director and principal clarinetist Nicole van Broeken and myself, I would like to conclude this evening's Voyage of Musical Discovery by acknowledging our principal sponsors, Paul and Sandra Solteri, and many other individual donors for their incredible support, which enables us to present these unique series. Thanks to Elizabeth Moore, Elizabeth Jigelin, and Charles McInnes for their support in preparing the education kit for this program, which is available on our website, arco.org.au. Thank you and good evening.